Aging, it's a journey as inevitable as the rising sun, yet so often misunderstood. For most of us, it's a word tied to what we see on the outside, the fine lines that appear around the eyes, the slow graying of hair, or the subtle stoop in posture. But what if aging was so much more than these visible signs? What if the real story lies in the quiet, often overlooked changes unfolding deep beneath the surface? In your muscles, your mind, your metabolism, and even your very essence. It's easy to think of aging as a process of loss, losing strength, losing sharpness, losing energy. But there's a different way to see it. Aging is a profound transformation, a complex symphony of biological, psychological, and spiritual shifts that shape who we are in ways far beyond the mirror's reflection. The changes might be subtle, almost imperceptible, but they carry messages. Messages about your health, your resilience, and your future. The body is a master storyteller, and as we grow older, it speaks to us in whispers, subtle shifts that hint at our true age beyond the calendar. These are not dramatic headlines but quiet clues. A slight change in strength, a shift in skin texture, the way our thoughts flow, how our metabolism handles the food we eat, or the quality of our sleep. Each tells a chapter in the story of aging, and together they paint a vivid picture of our well-being. Recognizing these signs isn't about fear or defeat, it's about empowerment. When we learn to read our body's language, we gain the ability to intervene early, to nurture ourselves with knowledge and care, and to continue living fully and vibrantly. It's about understanding that aging is not a cliff to fall off, but a path to walk with wisdom, dignity, and grace. For men, in particular, these subtle changes often come disguised beneath layers of habit and denial. The world teaches us to push through, to ignore the whispers until they become shouts. But true strength lies in listening, in tuning into those quiet signals and responding with kindness and action. Over the course of this journey, we'll explore 5 subtle but powerful changes in the male body and mind that reveal your authentic age. The age your body carries silently, waiting for you to notice. We'll uncover the science behind these signs, share stories that resonate, and offer practical wisdom to help you not just survive but thrive. Because aging is not just about counting years. It's about understanding the intricate dance of time and biology, mind and spirit. It's about embracing a new chapter with awareness, respect, and above all, hope. So let's begin this exploration together, to see aging not as an end, but as a deeper beginning. To listen carefully to the language of our bodies and minds, and to honor the wisdom that only time can give. There's a quiet transformation that begins well before the first gray hair appears, one that you might barely notice at first, but its impact resonates deeply through every part of your life. It's the gradual loss of muscle mass and strength, a shift so subtle that many men dismiss it as simply getting older. But make no mistake, this change speaks volumes about your body's inner condition, your vitality, and your ability to move through the world with confidence and independence. Muscle is more than just a symbol of strength or masculinity. It is a living, breathing tissue that supports your skeleton, fuels your metabolism, and protects your organs. With every step you take, every task you perform, muscles work silently in the background. Yet, after the age of 30, muscle mass naturally starts to decline, a process known in medical terms as sarcopenia. For men over 60, this loss accelerates, often going unnoticed until it begins to interfere with daily life. Have you ever caught yourself feeling unexpectedly tired after climbing a flight of stairs? Or noticed that lifting a heavy box feels more taxing than it used to? These might seem like small inconveniences, but they are early signals that your muscles are losing their strength and endurance. Over time, without intervention, this decline can lead to serious challenges, reduced mobility, increased risk of falls, and a loss of independence. What makes this change particularly insidious is how gradual it is. Unlike a sudden injury or illness, muscle loss creeps in slowly, masked by the busy routines and distractions of everyday life. It's easy to attribute a lack of energy or difficulty with physical tasks to just getting old. But in truth, these signs are your body's way of asking for attention. The science behind this process reveals a complex interplay of factors. Hormonal shifts, particularly decreases in testosterone, play a significant role. Alongside this, changes in nutrition absorption, reduced physical activity, and inflammation all contribute to the gradual erosion of muscle tissue. Yet here lies the hopeful truth. Muscle loss is not an irreversible fate. With the right knowledge and approach, men can reclaim their strength. Resistance training, tailored exercise programs, and proper nutrition rich in protein and essential vitamins can rebuild muscle and restore function. But more than that, this process is an invitation, a call to reconnect with your body, to listen closely, and to treat it with the care it deserves. Beyond the physical, regaining muscle strength has profound psychological effects. It restores confidence, renews a sense of purpose, and nurtures a feeling of autonomy that is priceless in the years ahead. Strength is not just about muscles, it's about reclaiming your power to live fully. So if you've started noticing these subtle shifts, that slight decrease in your ability to carry, climb, or simply move with ease, know that this is your moment. A moment to take control, to act with intention, and to embrace a new chapter of vitality and strength. Because aging doesn't mean surrendering to weakness. It means learning the language of your body, responding with wisdom, and choosing to thrive. The skin, the body's largest organ, a living canvas that tells the story of our lives. Each wrinkle, each line, every change in texture whispers tales of sunlit days, laughter shared, and challenges faced. But beyond these visible marks lies a deeper transformation, one that signals much more than mere surface aging. It's the gradual loss of skin's elasticity and the subtle shift in its texture, a change that quietly reveals your body's true passage through time. You might notice that the skin around your eyes or hands feels thinner, less supple, or even a bit rougher than before. What was once firm and resilient now yields more easily to the touch, sagging ever so slightly where it once held taut. These changes aren't just cosmetic, they reflect the underlying shifts happening at a cellular level. Skin elasticity is governed by two vital proteins, collagen and elastin. Collagen acts like a scaffold, providing structure and strength, while elastin allows the skin to stretch and bounce back. As we age, the production of these proteins slows down dramatically. Environmental factors like sun exposure, pollution, and lifestyle choices, smoking, poor nutrition, lack of hydration, accelerate this decline even further. What does this mean in practical terms? The skin loses its ability to repair itself as efficiently, becoming more vulnerable to damage, dryness, and irritation. Fine lines deepen into wrinkles, and what once was a youthful glow gradually dims. This process often catches men off guard because society's narratives tend to focus less on skin care for men, leaving many unaware of the subtle yet significant shifts taking place. Yet understanding these changes opens a door, a gateway to preserving and even rejuvenating skin health. Modern science reveals that with intentional care, the skin's decline can be slowed. Hydration, antioxidants, and sun protection become powerful allies. Gentle cleansing and moisturizing routines designed for aging skin nurture its natural defenses and restore softness. But beyond the products and protocols, this change in skin is a metaphor for aging itself. It teaches us about resilience and vulnerability, about the beauty found in imperfection, and the strength required to accept change gracefully. The skin's texture, in its delicate evolution, mirrors the human spirit, flexible yet firm, weathered yet enduring. When you begin to honor your skin's changing needs, you're doing more than addressing surface appearance. You're listening deeply to your body's call for respect and nourishment. This practice fosters a profound connection to self-care, one that radiates confidence and self-love from the inside out. So next time you look in the mirror and notice the subtle shifts in your skin, see them not as losses but as reminders of the journey you've traveled, the wisdom earned, and the vitality still vibrant beneath every line. Because aging skin is not just a sign of time passing, it's a testament to a life fully lived. There's a moment, often so slight it slips by unnoticed, when the sharpness of your mind feels a little less razor-like. Names may dance just beyond recall, or concentration flickers like a candle struggling against the breeze. These aren't just random lapses, they're the subtle signs of cognitive shifts that quietly mark the passage of time. Cognition, the wondrous process that allows us to think, remember, and focus, is not immune to aging. It evolves, sometimes gradually, sometimes unpredictably. The brain, like the body, experiences changes in structure and function. Neurons may fire a bit slower, connections can weaken, and the flow of information isn't always as seamless as it once was. You might find yourself misplacing keys more often or pausing mid-sentence as the word slips away. Perhaps you struggle to maintain focus during conversations or feel your mental stamina wane after hours of work. These experiences can trigger frustration or even fear, but understanding them as natural shifts rather than early doom offers a powerful shift in perspective. Science tells us that while some cognitive decline is typical, it is not inevitable or absolute. The brain's plasticity, its remarkable ability to adapt and rewire itself, remains vibrant well into old age. This means memory and focus can be nurtured, sharpened, and even enhanced with intentional effort. Mental stimulation through learning, problem-solving, social interaction, and mindfulness can act as cognitive workouts, strengthening neural pathways. Nutrition plays a crucial role too. Antioxidants, omega-3 fatty acids, and essential vitamins nourish brain cells and guard against oxidative stress and inflammation. But beyond biology, these cognitive shifts invite a deeper philosophical reflection. They teach us humility, a gentle reminder that even the sharpest minds have their limits. They encourage patience, both with ourselves and others, as we navigate the complexities of aging. More importantly, they offer a chance to redefine what intelligence means in later life. Wisdom, emotional insight, and the ability to synthesize life experiences are cognitive treasures that often deepen with age. The focus may shift from rapid recall to thoughtful reflection, from quick answers to profound understanding. Recognizing and embracing these subtle cognitive changes empowers you to take proactive steps, to engage in activities that challenge and delight the mind, to cultivate environments rich in learning and connection, and to practice self-compassion when memory falters. Aging mindfully means accepting that memory and focus will evolve, not disappear. It means celebrating the nuanced, layered intelligence that time gifts us, and continuing to grow in ways the years never take away. Because the mind, much like the body, carries the stories of our past and the promise of our future, if we listen carefully and nurture it with intention. There's a quiet shift within, an invisible rhythm that governs how your body transforms the food you eat into energy. As the years unfold, this rhythm changes, sometimes so subtly that it escapes immediate notice, yet it holds profound implications for your health and vitality. This is the change in metabolism, the engine behind every calorie burned and every ounce of energy produced. Metabolism is more than just a scientific term. It is the pulse of life itself, the biochemical symphony that fuels every heartbeat, every breath, every movement. But after the age of 60, this symphony slows down. The body's metabolic rate, the speed at which it converts calories to fuel, declines naturally. This means your body burns fewer calories at rest and during activity than it once did. This shift often manifests in unexpected ways. Clothes may feel tighter despite no changes in diet. The scale inches upward, often revealing stubborn fat accumulation around the abdomen. Muscle mass, as we discussed earlier, diminishes, and with less muscle, the body burns even fewer calories. It's a cycle that can seem frustrating, even disheartening. But these changes are not merely about numbers on a scale. They reflect deeper alterations in hormonal balance, digestive efficiency, and cellular function. Insulin sensitivity may wane, making blood sugar control more challenging. Thyroid function can slow, impacting energy levels. Even the way your body processes fats and carbohydrates transforms, subtly shifting your nutritional needs. Understanding these metabolic changes is crucial, not just to manage weight, but to maintain energy, support muscle health, and reduce the risk of chronic diseases like diabetes and heart conditions. The good news is that metabolism is not a fixed fate. Adopting lifestyle strategies that align with your body's evolving needs can turn the tide. Regular physical activity, especially strength training and aerobic exercise, can rev up your metabolism and preserve muscle mass. Mindful eating, choosing nutrient-dense foods, balancing macronutrients, and paying attention to portion sizes nurtures your body's metabolic health. Hydration, sleep quality, and stress management also play silent yet powerful roles in this complex metabolic dance. Each element contributes to hormonal balance and cellular repair, reinforcing your body's resilience. This change in metabolism and weight invites a shift in mindset as well. It asks for patience and compassion, recognizing that the strategies that worked in your youth may need thoughtful adjustment now. It encourages a focus on health and vitality rather than arbitrary ideals of appearance. More than a physical adjustment, it is a call to listen closely to your body's signals, to respect its rhythms, and to nourish it with wisdom and care. Embracing this subtle change empowers you to take control, fostering a balanced and sustainable approach to aging well. Because metabolism, like life, is fluid, it requires attention, adaptation, and above all, kindness to yourself as you navigate its evolving landscape. Sleep, the mysterious healer that cradles us each night, repairing body and mind, weaving the threads of memory, emotion, and restoration into the fabric of our being. Yet, as the years pass, this sacred rhythm often shifts in ways that quietly disrupt our nights and ripple through our days. You might find yourself waking earlier than before, or struggling to fall asleep even as your body craves rest. Nights once filled with deep, uninterrupted slumber may now be punctuated by frequent awakenings or restless tossing. These subtle changes in sleep patterns are common among older adults, yet they carry profound effects on overall health and quality of life. What causes these alterations? The answer lies in the complex interplay of biological, psychological, and environmental factors that govern our internal clock, the circadian rhythm. This rhythm, synchronized by the brain's master clock in the hypothalamus, orchestrates the timing of sleep and wakefulness, hormone release, and body temperature. With age, the circadian rhythm tends to advance, meaning the body naturally wants to go to sleep and wake earlier. Melatonin, the hormone that signals sleep onset, is produced in smaller quantities. Additionally, medical conditions, medications, pain, and lifestyle habits can further fragment sleep, making deep restorative phases less frequent. The consequences extend beyond mere tiredness. Poor sleep compromises cognitive function, mood stability, immune defenses, and metabolic health. Chronic sleep disturbances have been linked to increased risks of heart disease, diabetes, and even dementia. For men navigating the subtle transitions of aging, understanding and addressing these changes becomes essential. But amidst these challenges lies opportunity. Embracing good sleep hygiene, consistent bedtimes, a dark and quiet sleep environment, and avoidance of stimulants can help recalibrate the sleep-wake cycle. Physical activity during the day promotes better sleep quality, while mindfulness and relaxation techniques soothe the restless mind. Importantly, recognizing that some sleep changes are natural encourages a compassionate acceptance rather than frustration or fear. It invites a deeper awareness of your body's evolving needs and the rhythms that sustain your vitality. Sleep, after all, is not merely an absence of wakefulness, but a dynamic state of renewal. By honoring its altered cadence, you honor your entire being, body, mind, and spirit, fostering resilience and grace throughout the aging journey. So when night falls and your eyes grow heavy, listen closely to the gentle signals. Cultivate rest not as a lost treasure but as an ever-present gift, evolving with you, night after night. Aging is not merely the passage of time marked by subtle physical and mental changes. It is a profound journey, a transformation that calls us to embrace ourselves fully, to find strength in vulnerability, and to discover beauty in the unexpected layers of experience. The signs we've explored, from muscle loss to cognitive shifts, metabolic changes to sleep alterations, are not just symptoms or warnings. They are invitations. Invitations to slow down, to listen deeply to our bodies and minds, and to respond with care and intention. They remind us that aging is a sacred process, one that shapes not only our outward form but our inner wisdom. Each subtle change is a page in the story of who we are becoming, a narrative rich with lessons, resilience, and grace. To face aging with courage means to accept these changes without fear, to seek knowledge rather than denial, and to nurture both body and spirit. It means redefining what it means to be vibrant and alive beyond youth, finding joy in new rhythms, deepening relationships, and cultivating a legacy of wisdom that transcends time. Remember, your age is not a limitation but a tapestry woven from decades of growth, love, challenges, and triumphs. By understanding these signs, you gain power to act, to adapt, and to thrive in your later years. If this journey resonates with you, if you find value in embracing aging with insight and grace, I invite you to join our community. Subscribe to the channel for more content that empowers, educates, and inspires. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments, because together, we can redefine aging not as decline, but as a rich chapter filled with purpose and meaning. Thank you for walking this path with me. Here's to aging wisely, living fully, and embracing every moment with grace.